Good morning to everybody. Herr Bundestagspräsident, Panie Premierze, ambassadors, honored guests, rector, professors, dear students, and dear colleagues. Welcome to the 2018 Natolin graduation debate on future of Europe. I first want to thank our special guests, the President of the German Bundestag, Wolfgang SCHÄUBLE, and the Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz MORAWIECKI, for accepting our invitation to join us to debate future of Europe. Thank you, Mr. President, Prime Minister, for the privilege of having you with us in the College of Europe at the Natolin campus at the occasion of closing the academic year 2017-18. I also wish to thank Mr Ryan HEATH, the political editor of Politico Europe, for agreeing to moderate the debate. Dear students of the 2017-18 Simone Weil promotion, this is the last event which is organized for you as part of the academic year here. It is a culmination of your stay at the college and of your studies of Europe here. I hope that this debate will give you new ideas for future of Europe. The purpose of inviting our distinguished guests today is not to dwell on the troubles of the past. It is rather to draw on their wisdom and experience in order to map out the challenges and solutions for the future. Therefore, we are incredibly fortunate to have with us for this debate two such distinguished speakers. The President of the German Bundestag, Wolfgang SCHÄUBLE, is one of Europe's longest-serving active politicians.
Old man.
Almost no other European figure has had such long and direct experience at the highest level of the European Union. As a result, he is often turned to for his wisdom and understanding of the European Union and European matters. Mr. President, we are immensely honored by your agreeing to be with us today. Mateusz Morawiecki is Prime Minister of the host country of the College of Europe, Poland. A respected banker and manager, he left behind a career in the private sector to devote himself to public service. As former Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister and Minister for Development, he knows at first hand the challenges of both the national and EU economy. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your presence here today and for the great honor you have given to us in accepting our invitation. Last but not least, Mr. Ryan HEATH, an experienced journalist who currently works as the political editor for Politico Europe. He is the author of the widely read Politico Playbook, a project that gives him deep insights into contemporary Europe, matched by few other journalists. And so, without further ado, I hand over to Mr. Ryan HEATH, our moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Vice Rector. I will moderate in the spirit that everything is possible when we talk. Mr. Prime Minister, we'll kick off with you. The critics say that Poland is isolated inside the EU, and yet, as the migration debate and meeting yesterday showed, without even being there, the debate is moving in your direction. The floor is yours.
Well, I think that what is critically important for all of us is to also understand that to have a level playing field, we have to have also non-discriminatory approach with regard to from what is the point of start for many countries. And like Wolfgang, Mr. President, understands very well this because he was directly involved in dealing with all the matters in post-reunification, with German Democratic Republic and so on. And some Western European partners and friends sometimes forget about this legacy from the past, that like half of Europe was left behind the Iron Curtain and we were in a completely different situation. And this relates to many different matters, including this one which you mentioned. But more specifically to your question, my direct reply is that there are different approaches with regard to this issue of refugees, and well, like we can ask ourselves how many people from from Africa we can accept. 1 million, okay, 10 million, 100 million. There is 1,100 million people in Africa, and definitely we have to have a completely different solution for issues developed there. We need more of a Marshall Plan for Africa. We need to strengthen external borders and also to engage meaningful money, meaningful funds to develop programs in situ in Northern Africa to avoid human trafficking and so on. And also the idea which came up a couple of, I think, years ago, 2-3 years ago, to prepare hotspots and to deal with asylum seekers and with migrant workers, or in those places, rather than having them in Europe and having all the problems with distributing quotas, allocating refugees, is something what I am very pleased with, that the pendulum is going in this direction, and our some of our leaders began to understand that forcing countries, sovereign countries with different historic experiences to accept quotas and forgetting about their specific situation, like Poland, for instance, we have 25,000 people from Chechnya and people from Middle Asia, like Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. They are coming to Poland, and some of them are asylum seekers as well. This is simply not okay to take one into consideration and disregard the other. So it was our common decision of Visegrad countries. You probably know we met in Budapest a couple of days ago to wish them well, but not to go there, because a couple of days later we have the European Council specifically dedicated to those matters, and I believe that this is the way how to, well, like on the bilateral basis and multilateral basis, we can meet whoever wants, wherever wants, but the European institutions have to preserve unity and fairness in their approach, and this is why we decided to work in a different format, so to say.
Mm-hmm. President Schäuble, speaking of European unity, you've spoken of migration as the great challenge to democracy of our time. Europe has a common border, it has a shared space, at least among most of the member states. How can those survive without a shared policy?
I think in my reading, European integration started with opening borders. We had centuries of wars about borders, for example, between France and Germany, and so on. And as long as we disputed about borders, there was no stability, and sometimes even no peace. Therefore, not to dispute on borders, but open borders is the beginning of European integration. And therefore, if we have to preserve that Europe is a continent with open borders. That's the biggest achievement. And we did it. Of course, in this globalized world of the 21st century, whether you like it or not, the migration issue is one of the major challenges for global stability. And Europe is in a very specific way confronted with this situation. Of course, actually, we are concentrated on the problems with the Mediterranean and the neighborship and so on. I have been Minister of Interior in Germany twice. First time it was from 1989 to 1991. And even in that time, we have a big debate in Germany on asylum and the right on asylum. And I fought 3 terrible years to amend our constitution to make our right for asylum workable with the global solutions and the Convention of Geneva Convention. It was a terrible debate. And in that time, we had every year 500,000 and more asylum seekers, not from the south, from the east. Actually, we have from the east, from the south. But others, like Poland, have external borders as well. Germany has no external border, actually, in Europe. Therefore, we are in it. But that is my thing. If we want to prevent that we have open borders in Germany, in Europe, we have to understand that the management and the protection. But I prefer to say management, because protection means we will not build walls around about Europe. No, we don't want wars. We have to save lives if people are in danger to drunk in the Mediterranean and so on. But we have to fight criminal organizations, human trafficking. And therefore, we need better solutions. I am hopeful that we will get it. Sometimes Europe only moves under pressure, but it has to be done. And we have to understand, in my opinion, in any European member state, that solidarity is a must for everyone. And it is not a matter of generosity, and it's a matter of mutuality. And of course, solidarity with all member states with external borders is a precondition for having that. And in this regard, if we take regard on the specific situation, and by the way, the specific burden of the past and the legacy of the history and so on, then we can do it in a much better way than we used to do in the last couple of years, and we have to do so. And I'm quite optimistic. As soon as all heads of states and governments will meet in Brussels, and not only a few, we will find solutions. I'm quite optimistic.
Mr. Prime Minister, is one of those solutions that countries that are not big primary recipients of refugees, asylum seekers, other unauthorized migrants, that they have to support those more at the front line, like Italy and Greece, in a financial fashion? That seems fair. And then on another question of fairness, Poland, if I'm not mistaken, has more internal migrants in the EU than any other country. So is it fair that Polish people can emigrate in such numbers to other European countries, but not accept migrants in the case of the refugees and the asylum seekers?
Well, that's a very awkward question, because I would like all those Poles to come back to Poland. So this is their individual decision. They are strengthening other countries. They are paying taxes in other countries. We now have 3.8% of unemployment rate, one of the lowest in the European Union according to Eurostat. And I would like all them back in Poland. It's their private and individual decision, and based on Schengen Schengen based on other rules about what is possible, what might be not longer possible after Brexit, for instance. But this is not, for me, not an argument, because our country is losing. It's not gaining. Our country is losing, 2 million, was losing, and now not anymore. People are coming back, but in tens of thousands rather than hundreds of thousands, unfortunately. So our country was losing, and you want me to lose more, or you want me to pay more? We are paying our price for keeping stability at the eastern flank of the European Union. And in particular, what is disregarded is the Russian invasion on Ukraine. It is not very well appreciated from the Brussels perspective, but there is a real war in the Donbas area, in one part of the Ukraine where close to 10 million people live, and many people as homeless and hopeless. They have escaped from this part of Ukraine, and they have found their new home in Poland. And yes, most of them are working. Some of them we are helping in different through different social security channels. But this is the way how we try to also help preserving peace in this part of the world. But I'm not diminishing, reducing the importance of the southern problems. Therefore, we have actually, in the cooperation with the European Investment Bank, we have made either the biggest or the second biggest contribution to the European Resilience Initiative prepared by European Investment Bank. This is the European Resilience Initiative is going to be quite a big fund to deal with the problems, a little Marshall Plan for Libya and Syria, very much needed to rebuild hospitals and schools and basic infrastructure. And we want to participate in this. And if people decide in Brussels that we have to put more money for those funds, I'm absolutely ready to do so immediately.
If I may, I would never accept to mix or to compare the migration issue with the basic freedoms in the European integration. In Europe, in the European Union, the social freedoms, the freedom of movement and the freedom of market is the basic of European integration. That has nothing to be compared with the migration issue. Therefore, I would strongly support the Prime Minister in saying that it's totally different things.
Good to hear. Maybe gently shifting away from the migration topic, but still related to it. It seems to me that countries in the European Union love to mutualize their problems, whether it's debt in Greece, whether it is Angela Merkel's current domestic difficulties on migration, but are much more jealous in guarding their success. Is that a sustainable situation, Mr. President?
I didn't really get your. What is it?
It's that people are much more willing to turn to European solutions or to ask for European support when they have a particular problem on an issue. But when you're doing well, when Germany does well, Germany wants to guard what it has, not share what it has. Poland does very well out of the cohesion funds now. You will attempt to guard that as much as possible. Yeah.
Sorry, but I think partly that is human nature. If you are fine, you are always you are also entitled to be complacent, and if you have problems, you are looking for some other who can be taken as guilty. But having said this, as Germans, I'm an old man. You have mentioned it. It's fine.
I didn't mention it.
Look, I have been born in 1942. I grew up in the Black Forest. It's in the neighborship to France. My constituency, by the way, and I have been sometimes elected in this constituency, not too often, but it's the neighborship of Strasbourg. I have very good memories what happened after World War II, and it was totally different. And therefore, when we traveled only for some kilometers about the border of the Rhine Valley, it was an adventure. And your generation, Even if you travel to Hong Kong is nothing, or China is nothing. What is about Galapagos Insula or so, somewhere abroad? It's normal for you. The world is open. Europe is open. That is totally different. And we, the Germans, I know German history. The older I become, the more I have. And I do understand we Germans wouldn't have had our second chance, as it was named by the German-American historian Fritz Stern, after World War II and after all what happened. Only without European integration and Atlantic Partnership, with also respect, not to be forgotten, European integration and Atlantic Partnership have been two sides of one coin. And we must, even in these very days, not forget. Without this, we wouldn't have so much. Therefore, a stable Europe, a well-doing Europe, is the best, maybe the only precondition for a well-doing future for Germany. Therefore, it's not different things. And therefore, we try to stabilize Europe as much as we can. We know we have, by our geography, we are in the center of Europe. If the Swedes and the Spains would go for war, they did it 400 years ago. They have to do it in Germany. If Napoleon wanted to go to Russia, he did it 200 years ago, roundabout. By the way, he sacrificed more German lives than French lives he had sacrificed before already.
And Polish, by the way.
And Polish, by the way, of course. Yeah, you know much better than me. Therefore, we, Poland as well as Germany, we have the most interest in a well-doing Europe. Because otherwise we have not to, and by the way, in this globalized century, that is the migration issue with also respect as well. We will only remain relevant for ourselves if we have a common voice. Look at the demography. In some years, only today, we have even not 10% of world population, and we are declining fast. Therefore, it's a must for us, and therefore, of course, in the daily work, you are saying, what is good we are doing ourselves, what is bad is from the others, but that's not the way we have to stabilize.
One little addendum to what President Schäuble said is also very important in the context of the economic life and financial interdependencies, because people tend to, different organizations and countries in particular, to ask for support and solidarity, which really in a hidden way means a moral hazard. Like the current discussion in the context of Eurozone and about for instance, the common pan-European deposit guarantee scheme. Well, to some extent, it's a good example of risks behind it, because if we create pan-European shelter umbrella for the risks in the banking sector, but not only, insurance sector and others, this can lead to enormous moral hazards. People start behaving completely differently, and this is my experience from my previous incarnation in the banking sector, and here the levers and all the capital relative to assets. It's a tricky relationship. So to reply to your point, apart from all the political and historical dimensions which Wolfgang mentioned, I would like to add this additional economy-related jeopardy, because it's very, very nice to call for solidarity in the context of Greece or Italian banking sector, but what it really means and what other moral hazard it may bring with it, we have to really keep in mind.
Look, that is the very reason why in my former life as finance minister, I loved the then Polish finance minister, because he understood what is the problem of moral hazard. Many of my colleagues didn't, but he did.
Thank you.
Picking up this idea that people have different perspectives on Europe now to perhaps the founding generation, and obviously that's at the front of our minds as a new generation of future leaders and builders of Europe is here in the room with us. It struck me from the latest Eurobarometer survey, this survey of the 28,000 people in the 28 member states and their attitudes to the EU, that it came through that there are higher levels of support than ever for the EU, but it also seems clear that there is more persistent criticism than ever of different elements of how the EU functions. And so it struck me almost as a new normal, that there is not so much the narrative of a dream of peace and prosperity anymore, but there is just a day-to-day reality of Europe. And people, especially in light of Brexit, feel more secure in their membership and more able to criticize it on a regular basis. Both of you, do you think that is the new normal in how Europe is going to operate? That the EU is now so embedded that the discussion is much more like national debate and national criticisms of politics and politicians than something that is on a pedestal and separate in Brussels?
You as the Prime Minister.
In this critically important question about the future of Europe and the vision for Europe, I do believe that we have to have a vision, not necessarily ever closer union, because the last couple of years or maybe last decade has clearly shown to us that some utopian ideas may sound nice for the world of academia or media, but they are not necessarily bought by people and popular votes. Like last 5 European votes in Denmark, in Italy, in Greece, in the Netherlands, and Brexit, of course, were against Europe. So it's a clear sign of why how people express their opinions about the future, and we cannot disregard it, all of those signals. So taking it one by one, I think that we have to find new ways of how to fund Europe, and one of the African elephants in the room is VAT gap and tax havens. They are my 2 critically important points, which I try to mention on many occasions. Just to give you a comparison, an annual budget of the European Union, helping so well to integrate, to fund infrastructure, to fund common agriculture policy, and in the near future to fund PESCO and innovation funds, which is very good, which is the very right move. The annual budget of the EU is 155 billion euro. The recent estimation of the European Commission about the loss of from the VAT gap was 160 billion euro per annum, and the loss with regard to the tax havens is 165 billion euro. So, like Germany and Poland in particular, we are not tax havens. We work very hard building all the infrastructure and economic power of our companies. And by the way, lots of them are Mittelstand, are small and mid-sized companies. At the same time, some other countries, some of our neighbors, or neighbors of Germany, they are tax havens, and I don't think this is right. This is beggar thy neighbor policy. And the other thing which I have mentioned, VAT gap. Poland was one of the most successful countries in the world. Over the last 2 years, we were able to close 75% of the VAT gap in a very short period of time. By the way, we have done this thanks to some banking-related instruments like big data, data analytics, and we were able to target all the VAT carousel frauds and missing trader links in a specific way. So let's address those huge issues, and let's imagine that we will have, from the digital taxation agenda of President Macron and Chancellor Merkel, we will have only 20 or 30 billion out of 160 billion lost through the Googles and Apples and so on of this world. This will enormously boost in a positive way the opportunities to invest in the common future, in Horizon 2020, New Horizon 2020, in defense industry, whatever other innovation-related industries. So I would like to show new areas to address through which we could strengthen the European integration and through which we could address lots of populist related tensions and imaginations, some of them real, some of them not so real, but they are there. And we have to address them, and money always helps. And this money is there. In VAT mafias, let's fight with them, and in tax havens, let's fight with them.
Is that just a quick follow-up on that before we turn to President Schäuble? With someone like President Juncker at the Commission, who is obviously Prime Minister and Finance Minister of Luxembourg, potentially someone like Mr Rutte at the Council next year, do you or can you trust figures like that from those countries to fight that fight? Or does it have to be other people who fight that fight for it to succeed? Well, Mr Juncker has been involved in one of the tax systems you complain about. So can he be successfully in charge of reforming it?
LuxLeaks, you mean, and so on. Panama Papers. Well, I understand he kind of apologized for this. It is, well, probably, well, I think Jean-Claude, I spoke with him many times. I find him very sensible, a very experienced and forward-looking politician. So I take glass half full rather than half empty. And what was in the past, I don't want to drill too much deeply into this. I just would like to have our system where we create more competitiveness in Europe through natural Schumpeterian mechanisms rather than through tax havens advantages. And I hope the previous Prime Minister of Luxembourg understands this today, and slowly but surely we will try to rebuild our, to change our system to also focus on real economy in particular, on how to make sector by sector more competitive vis-à-vis China, vis-à-vis the United States. This is the challenge for the whole Europe, and Poland wants to positively contribute to this.
Mr. Schäuble.
I would come back. I'm a good friend of Jean-Claude Juncker, and I think, as Prime Minister Morawiecki just mentioned, it is not a personal problem. It's a problem in substance, and it's a problem of global markets. And therefore, fighting tax fraud, fighting safe havens in taxation in this globalized world is easy to demand and very difficult to get done. And to get it done, we need again an efficient Europe. Neither Poland, nor Germany, nor any other European country will be able to fight efficiently tax havens in globalized financial markets. It's impossible. I suffered 8 years in the G20 forum, and we discussed, and we also we as political leaders in nation states have in many regards we have not many chances against globalized companies and globalized markets. And if we want even to give markets the rules they needed, and rules are only efficient if they are implemented, and that is a difficult thing in a globalized world, in financial markets especially, it's another reason for me to have a more efficient Europe. And having said this, coming back to your question, on the one hand, we have the Eurobarometer, a lot of confidence in most member states for Europe. On the other hand, as the Prime Minister mentioned, in any concrete decision, an increase of Eurosceptic mood. What does it mean? In my reading, it is, in general, people do understand in this 21st century we need a more common Europe, whatever this means in concrete. But in principle, we do it. And then what we have, what we face in the daily life is bureaucracy, rules which are complicated, and if we amend rules, they become more complicated, and the next amendment even more complicated, and at the end, no one understands. There's a lot of policies, but even for this, you don't need European integration. By the way, I can take a lot of examples from German legislation you can't understand. So complicated, not efficient. And that is maybe, in some regard, even our Western model of democracy is a little bit at stake. If you look at not only Eurosceptics, from Marx, and we have, and one of the problems is the lack of efficiency in our decision making. And in this regard, Germany is by far leading, with all the respect. You are much more efficient in Poland. We are really leading in a lack of efficiency in many regards. But this is a matter of too much perfectionism in regulation. And of course, it's also a problem in 28 member states in European Union, with different heritage, with different culture, with different experiences in social structures, which have to be respected by everyone. The same sentence in a legislation is implemented in a total different reality. That is the problem, and therefore we need a better structure. What have been solved of a European level, and what has to be remain on the national level. And actually, I'm totally convinced that most people in most European countries demand a better solution for migration, we just have discussed, a better solution in foreign and defense policy, because we can only, even since we have a United States which have told us that we European has to care a little bit more ourselves for security, then we have to do it, and no one can do it for itself. We can only do it together. And in a globalized world of economy and financial markets, we have to safeguard the common market, which is in the interest of all. I think we have to stabilize our European currency in the Eurozone. And if we become more efficient in these few regards, we will earn much more confidence in public opinion. That is what we have to do, pragmatically, efficiently. So lack of efficiency it may be the most danger for the confidence that people have in. And in this regard, I have spent a lot of my lifetime in developing a lot of ideas how we could academically Europe. Actually, I don't care. I want to do it an improvement of efficiency in migration management and defense policy and whatever it takes. And that means we have to be flexible, pragmatic. We have always to have in mind that if even we have to have differentiation in speed, that is, I have always in favor of this, but this must never be misunderstood as a division of Europe. But the one member state which is, for whatever reasons, the lowest, the slowest, cannot define the speed. That is, then we will not move. Therefore, member states who want to move faster should be allowed, but they have always to have in mind that everyone is regarded to join if they want. But we can no one force. Europe is always on the basis of voluntary. And if we have that in mind, we can improve efficiency, and then we will overcome this gap between polls and elections.
Multi-speed is more efficient in the end, Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, but there is one policy which is very successful and related with the name of Jean-Claude Juncker. This is the Juncker Plan. This is the European Fund for Strategic Investment. And here we have also a very good example of how sensible policies based on market rules can change the investment reality around us. And investment gap in Europe was estimated by the European Investment Bank to be on the level of 680 billion euro in 2016 alone. Even if this is very difficult to close the whole gap, the whole investment from the Juncker Plan, close to 300 billion euro, has enormously contributed to allocate capital in the infrastructure and some energy efficiency and some other areas. So I think in Europe we also need positive examples where we have decided about something and we were able to deal with this appropriately, and this is one example of such a kind. So I'm very supportive of market-related tools which could be leveraged, which could be strengthened by some European money, like the European Fund for Strategic Investment is, because it's a mixture of good appropriate calculations and putting money where the money is mostly needed, badly needed, in some telecom infrastructure, in some energy efficiency, housing efficiency, real estate, and this is a positive example we can build on this.
Should we join up two of your ideas? So that last idea with the 165 billion in lost tax, the 160 billion in VAT, that's the other half of the investment gap, isn't it? If you add up the Juncker Plan and those two things.
Too beautiful to be realized, probably in the entire.
But we have to dream sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that if we were able to close this even 10 or 20% and put this as a fund for investment and leverage this through the banking sector, through local governments, it could be a very positive development for the whole Europe.
I think it might be time to invite some of you in the audience to ask a question now. So we've got two gentlemen here, but we're going to be gender balanced. So I will take you two guys if we bring a microphone up to the third row, but then I'm going to look for some female faces in the audience. Yes, it's in the middle of the third row here. And I'm guessing you're part of the graduating class, but if you say your name and where you're from, that will help the guests.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. My name is Nicolas Heger. I'm going to ask the question in German, then this will be repeated by my friend in Polish in order to show German-Polish cooperation. The question is, Panie Premieri Morawiecki, lieber Herr Bundestagspräsident, die Zukunft Polens in der Eurozone. Und zwar, wir haben jetzt die Meseberg-Erklärung auf dem Tisch. Wir haben auch gerade gesehen, dass die Einlagensicherung und die Bekämpfung von Steueroasen hier in Europa sozusagen der gemeinsame Nenner sind. Und wir fragen uns jetzt, wird es nicht so langsam zunehmend attraktiv oder eher unabdingbar für Polen, bald dem Euro beizutreten?
Herr Schäuble, Panie Premierze, w świetle zmian strefy euro, jej reformy i wielu
Eurozone and the institutional reform, is it becoming more attractive for Poland to join the Eurozone, or does Poland perceive it more as an obligation stemming out from the treaty's provisions? Would joining the Eurozone be conducive of economic growth in Poland?
So the question is if in case of the reform of the Eurozone, is it becoming more economically attractive for Poland to join? And it might become a another factor for the growth of Polish economy, already thriving? Thank you.
It's a question probably to me to some extent. Some 25 years ago, I was studying on a similar college like this one in Basel, in the University of Basel. And I was happy to actually write my master thesis back then on the optimum currency areas. And optimum currency area, well, like it's a tricky thing with Bob Mandel and Roland McKinnon and Peter Kennan and all their theories of what does it take to really build an optimum currency area. And you look at Greece and Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, and you ask yourself, is it an optimum currency area? My reply to this, it is not an optimum currency area, and this is what the Brits have decided from the very beginning of this. It would be too easy to close the reply at this juncture, because I understand the whole politics of the European Union is so complex and it's so interlinked with the Eurozone that we actually we believe that you know, it's very important for the Eurozone to operate appropriately, and I'm very happy that the recent developments and which started with Mario Draghi's whatever it takes have calmed down the markets, the financial markets, and hopefully with a bit of luck and sensible policy vis-à-vis the budget deficits and public debt, there will be less of this, expenditure follies like the Greece did in the past, and the shopping spree in Spain in the past as well, because some common denominator, some common rules have to really be set and have to be observed by all the members of the Eurozone for it to become a little bit closer to the optimum currency area. Now, Balassa-Samuelson equation, some of you probably are very familiar with this, it's telling us that for a country which is catching up, like Poland is, there is a moment in time in the future where it might be sensible to join, but probably it's too early, because also of the disparities with regard to salaries, with regard to the productivity. Productivity is maybe half of what is in Germany, so thank you for your kind words, Mr. President, but it is not true that Poles are efficient and Germans are less efficient. It's actually the reverse. We would like to be as efficient and productive as Germany is, and we try to do so, and I'm very pleased that there is an increasing cooperation between Mittelstand German and Polish companies. Today, it's also for us to cut this long story short, it's also very important to have a potential buffer zone to deal with crisis. The third wave of a crisis will come sooner or later. Hopefully, it won't be disastrous. It will be manageable. But for us, there was only one reason why we have avoided deep recession like Slovakia or Latvia or Romania in 2009 and 2011-12 in the first and second wave of a crisis, and this was the Polish zloty, which weakened back then, and our exports went through the roof back then, and it helped us. So we are not ideological about this. We think that there is a way forward, and when our salaries will be 70 or 80% of German salaries, we have to come back to this question.
Yes, the woman in the blue and red jacket.
Hello, my name is Pia Höring. I'm referring to the title of this debate, which is the future of Europe. And I think especially we as the young generation now, my question is what can be done for the future of Europe? Because we understand there are different realities. History produced different realities in different countries in Europe, but especially as a young generation, what can we do besides closing tax havens?
I think my first answer is to the young generation itself. You have to care. You have to engage for Europe. You are doing it, by the way, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But remember the Brexit decision. The young generation was the group of age which has the poorest participation rate in the Brexit decision. And the young generation is suffering much more under the consequences of this decision than the old generation. That's always what I'm saying to young people in my country. You have to care on politics because you have to take the risk. By statistics, it's much more probable that you will suffer much more than me in my age. Therefore, care and make your. But of course, you can only build European integration as far as you get the confidence of population. In democracy, and we all prefer democracies, you are related to convince population. You must not only listen to polls. You have to give answers and not only to ask what are your answers, what shall I do? No, you have to make proposals but you have to convince. If you can't convince population, then you fail. That is what. And in this regard, once again, I would say important is actually that we increase efficiency of Europe and that we reduce the disputes in Europe and the disputes and bureaucracy. By the way, my regard on efficiency was on bureaucracy, the procedures, and we are really, no, I will not mention it. But having said this, increasing efficiency, we should, for example, I think it was a good example that you both did it in two languages. You have to suffer my English. I learned when I went to school, I learned French because I was in the French-occupied part of Germany after World War II. And therefore, I always suffered in years as finance minister that everyone was well speaking English, me not. But my response was, I have to suffer my English in listening. Now it's up to you. Having said this, I would not accept that I would be in favor that we in European forums we should discuss in English. And for the young generation, that's not a problem. But we must not neglect our national languages. And in the neighborship, we have to learn the language of the neighbor. Otherwise, the regions of former borders have not the function to bring populations together. Therefore, the development of cross-border regions or trans-border regions is a key for European integration in population as well. And therefore, it's very important that we work in this. What you are doing, moving students, young generation of students today, every student has parts of his studium in another European country. That is wonderful. And I have been very much in favor of a regulation which I learned it first time from Netherlands years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that they have said, if you want to study, you have minimum one semester study in another European country. If that is normal, Europe will be changed. It's up to you to change a lot of things in bringing people together. But on the way, still we are there, we have to defend the European values with all the respect. But the European values are also reasonably. Solutions must not only be human, but also reasonable. That is a huge challenge in the migration issue. Everyone wants to be helped and not to say, oh, sorry for you, but you are a refugee. It's your problem now. That is not European. But on the other hand, if we would take some 100 million from Africa, we would destroy Europe. It's impossible. And that is from the old Greeks, from Aristotle, the dispute between being human or being just. And politics means to be modest enough to understand you have only to do doable solutions to bring it together, and that's European. But on the other hand, I can tell you our European values, freedom, human dignity of every human being, of any human being, social coherence, socio-ecological Nachhaltigkeit, was ist? Sustainability, rule of law, are values which are shared by most people all over the world. But if we Europeans don't defend and don't prove that they count and they are efficient, we will not win it. You know, leaders in other parts of the world, including China, including the Muslim world, part of the world, are very nervous. Arabic Spring, China always, oh, how we can control it. Because they know freedom, liberty, democracy, rule of law is something what everyone wants to have. Therefore, it's up to us, to the young generation, to say that is a better way of life for a future in peace. If 8 billion people in this globalized world will not live in peace, that's not a good. And the people who have the biggest risk are the people in the well-doing parts of the world. And Europe is one of the well-doing parts of the world, therefore it's in our own interest.
Thank you, President Schäuble. We'll move in a couple of minutes to some further remarks from you, but the Prime Minister has many places to get to today. So I want to invite you to make some final response here or any other final remarks that you want to make to the class and to all the assembled journalists before you have to head off.
Well, actually, this last question, which on top of what Mr. President said, I would like to address it in also a slightly different way. And this is about the new way of producing goods and the employing capital and allocating capital, and the famous equation by Thomas Piketty. It has to be all taken into consideration, because more and more capital decides about technology, and technology decides about capital, who is rich and how much capital may be accumulated. And in this context, even if this is so difficult, we have to somehow address employee stock ownership plans and employee participation in this capital tort, in how this is distributed, redistributed, pre-distributed, whatever you call it. We cannot put our head in the sand, or at least there's such a saying in Polish, because, well, like you have those huge multinational giants. One Nobel Prize winners from 2014, I think, Jean Tirole, said how to tame powerful firms. We want powerful firms, but they have to really share their wellness and their wealth in a better way, and employ it, involve it in the prosperity of wider population. And this is why you young and very young people, you are in front of a completely different world. Let's imagine that robots and Internet of Things and machine learning and even artificial intelligence will really, to some extent, happen. It is happening. Robotics is happening right now, as we speak. And if it is so, robots is technology, technology is capital. Like who has to have the benefits of this whole technological development? It has to be much more widely spread through different social contract. The post-Second World War social contract is over. It's kind of obsolete. We have to find a new social contract, including the robotics and the new implementation of new technologies, but also how the the profits, income coming from this is distributed. And we have touched on this to some extent through the tax havens in particular. And it has to change. And I agree, by the way, with Mr. President about that this has to be globally addressed, or at least addressed on a European Union level. But somebody has to start, and therefore I'm grateful to President Macron and Chancellor Merkel that they bravely talk about digital taxation and addressing those examples of multinationals which abuse or to some extent misuse at least the taxation system. And the reason why I'm saying about those hard things like technology, income, taxation, rather than visionary and let's all live in peace, is that this is how we will be able to address the needs of the youth, of younger people, younger generations into the future. Your life will look differently than Mr. Schäuble's life post Second World War, and even my life during the communist times and post-communist transformation. And this is why we have to find new ways of distributing respect, distributing money, distributing peace, and this is also, by the way, your task, not only your question. Thank you. I have to go. Very
Good luck.
Whenever you have.
If I can help you, let me know.
I have your phone number. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. So, President Schäuble, we have around 20 more minutes. Would you like to conduct any prepared remarks, or would you prefer to continue with questions?
I'm ready to continue.
Okay.
I can always ask you if you want to leave. I deliver my menu.
I think we'd stay here all day if we could. You mentioned rule of law a couple of times in your last answer. And we see more and more questions about our global constitutional order, liberal institutions. You see the rise of China, which doesn't have so many of those institutions in the way that we know them. How do you see the EU functioning when there are these questions over even countries like Poland and Hungary, and you have this great unbalancing in the global geopolitical order?
I think in some regard, if we manage, if we achieve to deliver it in the European framework, we can be taken as an example even for a globalized world. But as long as we are even not able to get a solution of a European level, we must not think that we can teach the rest of the world. Because they're saying, oh, you don't get it even in Europe done, and we could do it in Europe. Therefore, we have to prove that this globalized world demands more, whoever you name it, multilateral decisions. And nation states alone cannot make the rules. Any human unity, any social unit needs rules. Any order of freedom needs rules, because without rules, we have suffered it in the financial markets. We deregulated. At the end, financial markets have been capable to destroy themselves. And they would have done it. Then they have to be saved by the taxpayers. The lesson is, if you want to make freedom stable, you need rules, and rules must be respected. The moral hazard problem has been mentioned, thankfully, by Prime Minister. I will not repeat. And the other problem is, of course, social coherence. In this globalized world, the social dimension is a much higher, much bigger challenge than it used to be. That has been written by Piketty, he has quoted it, and it's true. The more we can deliver in a European way, the better we will be able to convince others. That is my conviction, and therefore we cannot say, oh, we will only implement, let's say, a financial transaction tax. The idea is not as new. I suffered 8 years to fight for this, and I did get it even in the European level. Possible. But we cannot say if Panama is implementing such a, we will do it. Everyone is in favor, I know very well. When I started the discussion on financial transaction tax, my then British colleague said, Wolfgang, okay, as soon as you convince our American colleague, we will do it in the UK. But I knew even the American colleague has been very nervous whether the European would do it or not, because he knew that he would get a lot of pressure in the United States. Then I went to I said, okay, we will not get it in the European Union because UK will not agree. Not surprising. I said, okay, let's do it. Let's start in the Eurozone. My then Netherlands colleague said, Wolfgang, okay, as soon as London will be in place, we will get it. But without London, you do understand position of Netherlands related to impossible. So we started with enhanced cooperation, and we failed. Because if you are, that makes things so difficult.
Well, you haven't succeeded yet.
Yep. But now it's Macron and Merkel. They will.
Now, one other point that you made about rules is not only that they have to be respected, but they need to be enforceable if they work. And so maybe I'm not speaking strictly about a rule now, but if we think about NATO, obviously one of the things that makes President Trump most excited, most angry, is the idea that the NATO allies, most of them, are not contributing the 2% of GDP towards defense. And of course, Germany is one of the furthest away from meeting that goal. And so you've sat in the finance chair. You've watched German politics through so many eras now. How can Germany be pushed, forced, nudged, I don't know what the word is, but how can Germany go from being less than 1% of GDP on defense to 2% in order to make that a more functioning alliance?
Step by step, we have to do it. By the way, I have been the first member of Merkel government as finance minister who asked publicly for more money for defense. It was difficult in the coalition, I know very well. I remember it was not President Trump. It was President John F. Kennedy. If you know who was Kennedy, it's long ago. It was. We have
never heard of him. Who's that guy?
I have been young. We have all been fans of John F. Kennedy. Had he asked for a fairer burden sharing between the allies in the North Atlantic Partnership in that time, in the early 60s? Not you, and they are right. In this regard, they are right. It's not the way in which it's done by Mr. Trump. It's, you may discuss. If you do understand, you can discuss it. I do not understand. But we have to do it. And by the way, we European, as our Chancellor Merkel have said last year, whether we like it or not, we have to take a little bit more responsibility for our security ourselves. And that is what we can only do together. Alone, even France can't. Germany, impossible. Poland, impossible. Even Luxembourg can't. The problem of Luxembourg, Jean-Claude Juncker once have said this, if Luxembourg would go to war with China, they wouldn't have enough room to take the prisoners they would make in China.
That's more than the glass half full. This is on a completely different tangent now, but maybe it will give some insight to everyone in the room as they go off to work in their own cities or come to Brussels to work in EU institutions. I hear often from people from the countries that joined in 2004 and later, yes, of course, benefits from the EU, but they don't always feel equal in the system, that no matter what they do, sometimes they're always treated like the new people, the new tenants in the system.
Like children.
potentially like that.
Yeah.
And of course, Germany, you're bigger. It comes with certain rights and responsibilities, I suppose. What's your perspective of it being like around the council table or in the corridors of Berlin and Brussels? Do you feel that it is more of an equal relationship now? Have you used the weight of Germany in ways you regret in hindsight?
Look, I made the experience in Germany itself, because I have been Minister of Interior in Germany around about 1990. And of course, our new, let's say in the common parliament, after German reunification and so on, in government and in public discussions, whenever people from the former GDR made proposals, of course, our normal reaction has been, oh yes, good idea. We have discussed it 30 years ago, 20 years ago. We have examined, we do it in this way and that way. Okay, thank you very much, good question, but the problem is already solved. And they treated themselves like children. And that is what I have tried to say even to my colleagues, even in Germany, German politics, in Brussels, if someone is listening to me, mostly not, please avoid the situations that people which joined the European Union a little bit later than others feel themselves treated not as equal. We must not be so arrogant. We have our positions. Solidarity, for example, is of mutual interest. It's not a one-way track, but we can discuss what is the rule of law, the independence of justice, and so on and so on. But we have always to do it not in a way which is seen by others as arrogant, but in a way equal level, and then open discussion, and we will find solutions. That is what we have to do. And that if you want to join as young people and incoming leaders of Europe, and please, even if in Brussels institutions, European institutions, I know many people which are so impressively engaged for Europe integration and so on. But sometimes I have the feeling they are living in the mood that they are in the ideal world. The only problem is that the rest of Europe does not understand how ideal they are thinking and doing in Brussels. And that's a problem in democracy. If people don't understand what we are doing, and that is one of the problems. Let's say, I have some friends which are members of European Parliament, personal friends. If they make, whether they make things good or not, if people in my constituency want to criticize the results of politics in Brussels, they don't ask the member of European Parliament, they don't know him. They ask the member of national parliament, that is reality. And therefore, if you work in Brussels, for Europe, and they do so, please, have always in mind, you have not to see the reality in member states as people which are not as sophisticated as you. That is also to be misunderstood as arrogance.
Now, one final question from me, and we take a couple of quick ones from the floor. Let's say a process that might be regarded as one of your greatest controversies or one of your greatest achievements, the Greek bailout process. If it's not ended now, it's kind of, there's a horizon, there's a way for exiting that process, and that just happened last Friday. Have you got any reflections 9.5 years into that process about whether it's now on the right track, and has Europe done Greece justice in this process?
Look, I was so pleased when the Prime Minister mentioned the moral hazard that mentioned, because he knows much better. I have understood that economists have not been in favor of a common currency. And they have a lot of reasons for this. He mentioned it. I'm not an economist. I have become, in some regard, a little bit an economist. In 8 years of finance minister, I studied a little bit when I have been young, but I'm not an economist like Mateusz. But having said this, the decision for the common currency in Europe was a political decision. By the way, the man who is the father of the European currency is Jacques Delors. It's not German reunification, called Mitterrand. It has been long before Jacques Delors who said, oh, the economic integration in Europe and in European integration worked in the way after the defeat of the Common Defense Union. We started in the early 50s with the Defense Union. It was not accepted in the French Assemblée Nationale, 1954. Then we said, okay, economic integration is fine, everyone's interest, blah, blah, blah. And so Delors decided I think in the second half of the 80s, he said, we have achieved a level of economic integration which can only be stabilized for the future if we will introduce a common currency. Of course, we will have a lot of problems if we will not have a political union. But we will, being not able to build a political union at that time, we will have to agree on some rules. That was a pact on stability. But of course, rules, they must be implemented. And that's the problem of moral hazard. And now we cannot, whether you like it or not, and the Prime Minister has been right, I agree 100%. The European Monetary Union is a matter of fact. The dissolution of the monetary union and the European currency would cause a lot of frictions in the globalized economy, which no one can really imagine what will happen. It would be maybe something like a disaster. I don't know. I would not take the risk. Having said this, we have to do what we can. And that's always should be. And I think we have, the Greek example is a good example. It's not done, you are right. But we are in a better situation than we used to be 8 years ago. And therefore, you need someone who is as brutal as the then German finance minister, to say, oh, we have rules, and in some way you have to stick to the rules, otherwise we will destroy everything. On the other hand, we have, as there has never been a lack of solidarity to Greece. That's wrong. It's totally. Of course, political leaders in any member state are tempted if they have problems. And to solve the Greek economic problems, the lack of competitiveness is hard for any political leader. Good luck, I wouldn't do it in Germany. And of course, you are saying, oh, if we don't, we will not get money from Brussels or from Germany with this stupid finance minister or whatever it is. Okay, you have to take the role. But it's wrong. And it's wrong because you will not, you have to explain to your own constituency what are the very reasons. You have two alternatives. You can leave, then you will suffer a major disaster immediately. And then you will recover. From the day after you will recover. Slowly, but no one likes to take this decision. The Greeks didn't. I bid the Italian will not take the decision. Therefore, we have to manage it, but they have to understand, and we have to stick, that there are some rules, otherwise we will destroy the monetary union.
Now, time for your questions. There was a woman in the third or fourth row before. No. Okay, sorry about that. Gentleman in the grey jacket, and then also in the middle here.
First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Schäuble, for joining us this morning. As you, I was born and raised on the very west of Germany, and this year I had the privilege to study 1 year in Poland. And we were wondering, together with my Polish colleagues, why Germany and Poland never managed to set up something like we have in the Franco-German relations. You talked about languages earlier, how important it is that in bordering regions we learn each other's languages, and I think that is really working well in Baden-Württemberg or in North Rhine-Westphalia, where I come from, with the Dutch border. But when we see the funds, for example, allocated to the Deutsch-Französischen Jugendwerk, to the funds allocated to the Polish-German cooperation, one is wondering if there is not a bias towards this kind of cultural cooperation towards the West. And that is something I'd be happy to hear your answer about. Thank you.
And we'll just quickly take that second question because we need to move on to the final part of the event.
Thank you. I'm Victor Corbera. I would like to thank you for your intervention, and I would like to please ask you to develop a little bit more on the concept of moral hazard, especially speaking about the case in Greece. We were speaking about how Germany does not comply with the 2% objective on NATO, but Greece does. So maybe it's a moral hazard to speak about the skyrocketing suicide rates that were created by the crisis, or of cutting pensions instead of reducing the military expenditures of Greece from German companies mainly. So please, I would like to if you could reflect on this, if this is a moral hazard too. Thank you.
The first question was, why didn't we get the same what we enjoyed between France and Germany and between Poland and Germany? My first answer is it needed a lot of time between France and Germany as well. Nevertheless, or not to mention that, of course, the region at the border is totally different to the region between Poland and Germany today on behalf of the history, different history. Having said this, we have to do it in a similar way. By the way, I was being happy to see that the former Prime Minister of Saxony, the predecessor of one Prime Minister of Saxony, he told me he came from North Rhine-Westphalia, Milbad, and he said, I want to study Polish language because as neighbor of Poland, I have to learn language, the Polish language. Because I can't give the advice to the Polish neighbors, learn German, if I'm not ready to learn Polish. Of course, the younger generation will communicate in English language, but I think it is always preferable. Therefore, I am strongly in favor to develop the border regions on both sides. I mentioned even with the Prime Minister the region of Görlitz. It's a triangle between Poland, Czech Republic, and Saxony. It could be a key for a regional development highlight, and if we could increase the trilateral development in this region. I was Minister of Interior when we had to include Poland and Czech Republic in the Schengen system. That means to lift border controls. I can tell you I expected it as the biggest challenge in my period as Minister for Interior to lift border controls to Poland and Czech, because I knew even to lifting border controls to France 20 years ago was highly disputed in my own constituency, because it's a lack of security, blah, 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 because criminals are always on the other side of the border. That is quite normal. We did it successfully. If you look at what's going on in Frankfurt, on both sides of the border, it's quite interesting. Then it's not enough, but things are on the work, and I think you could. We have the university in Frankfurt and Oder, European University and so on, Viadrina, and we have to do much more in this regard, and we have to do it from both sides. Having in mind that, of course, the history at the border between Poland and Germany is totally different to the history of the region between France and Germany on behalf of the last centuries about. But in substance, it must be the same. So, the moral hazard and Greece, and you, of course, in some regard you are right, but in the defense budget in Greece you are not right. Because I remember very well that in all these years when we had Troika and disputes, these negotiations with the Troika, with the Greek government and so, they have always made the proposal, reduce your budget, your defense budget, reduce your defense budget. They did it not on behalf of NATO. They did it on behalf of two reasons I understood. The one is Turkey, and the other is the old system of some former leaders in the military system. And it was for any Greek government, including the Tsipras government, they always have said, no. Of course we understand we have to reduce our public expenditure. But where we do it is a matter of national sovereignty. We will not be advised from somewhere else, and we will not reduce our defense budget. That is, so the example is not right, because I can prove it. Having said this,
there's also an employment issue as well. If you change completely the Greek defense system at a time when unemployment is 20 or 25%.
But with all due respect, if you want to get, and I think they have made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but not enough till now. As long as you think, if you build your economy on a huge part of defense organization, you will not create a competitive economy. What Greek lacks is the competitiveness of economies. I have. In my time as finance minister, I have even once asked the German food companies, which in retail, and I said, why don't you sell products from Greece? And I managed to get them all the CEOs from the big huge companies to Athens to discuss, because the answer was quite easy. So Greek companies are not able to grant certainty in time, in quality, and so on. And you need it in the food retail business. Therefore, they have to increase their business. By the way, Greece, in all these times of European investment funds, including the Juncker 350 billion investment fund, and the EIB, and European structural funds. Greece was most time one of the member states which could take the smallest part of the money which was foreseen for Greece. They could take it because they had not opportunities for valuable investments. And that was the reason, and that has to be improved, and that cannot be done by increasing the defense budget.
I think we might have to wrap it up there. President Schäuble, I want to thank you really deeply. You've been very generous with your time. You're a man of unparalleled insights. So I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here that we're very, very grateful for this. I would have loved to have this as the debate at the end of my degree. So I hope you appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. We thank the Prime Minister in his absence as well. It's an excellent sign that we could see so much agreement in this discussion today. I hope that's a sign of things to come in future discussions around the council table. And then, of course, for all of the brains at the college who brought you together as a pairing and encouraged this event and invited the journalists along. I think we're all very grateful that it happened the way it did. So that's congratulations to everybody. Thank you.